I really want to talk about something that you've announced recently, and we've alluded to it about 1 million times throughout this podcast.
The big one.
Yes.
But
here we go.
I mean, this is your next challenge.
The next one.
Talk us through it. I've done a bit of research. I spent some time yesterday looking through it. I saw your Instagram post as well on it.
Yeah.
And it's all to do with the Amazon, and the Amazon recently has absolutely fascinated me. So I'd love to hear from you. What the hell is this next challenge? When are you doing it?
Yeah, man. So this has been something I've been working on now for, the idea came to mind about a year ago. I've been grinding hard for about 3-4 months to get it the green light, and we're at the place where I only announced it yesterday.
Yep.
This is the first podcast I've been on since announcing it.
Let's go.
Hey,
Boom.
come on. Let's go.
And so this next one will be to the Amazon. It's 3 world records within one journey, one of which is a world first, and 2 others are speed record. It's to a country called Suriname, which is northeast of South America, probably the most uncharted and unexplored country of the whole of the Amazonian countries. Nobody really goes there. It's 94% jungle coverage. And the only sort of mapping that was done before satellite was expeditions that took place in the 1800s, where they ventured inland to map the interior of Suriname, but only got so far before turning back due to disease, wildlife, injury.
Yep.
And I was actually contacted by Matt Wallace and Dick Locke, 2 lads that are out there who help run expeditions, who have helped Steve Backshaw with like filming Deadly 60 in some sections. And they came to me with this crazy idea of a source to sea of one of the most remote and uncharted rivers in the world, and the most central river of Suriname. And it will take us about 40 to 50 days, but we are fucking deep in the Amazon. Deep. The only way to get there is, of course, by helicopter. Not only that, there's nowhere to land. So the 4 of us will literally be looking out of the window onto pure jungle canopy. There's more forest per square kilometer in Suriname than any other country in the world, which makes it the greenest country. And in the greenest country, we'll be searching for a place to land. And if there's no place to land, we'll literally hover the helicopter above deep waters, and we'll physically have to jump into the deep water. Now, the water is, you've got caiman, you've got electric eels, you've got stingray, you've got piranha. There's a lot that we've got to contend with. But then all of a sudden we jump, and then the noise of the helicopter as it disappears, our only means of evacuation, will then be replaced by the sounds of the jungle at its rawest and purest. And from there, we then head towards the source of the Coppenham River. Now, here's the thing. Since planning it, what started as a cool adventure world first record has turned into a genuine expedition of exploration and discovery. There's no evidence to suggest that anyone has been to the source of this river. We've contacted mapping agencies and societies across Suriname, across the Netherlands, because Suriname used to be Dutch colonized, and the UK, the Royal Geographic Society. And all of the coordinates on the maps for the source of the river are off. There's no exact coordinates.
Wow.
So we might try to, if we can, map the source of this river. From there, we'll attempt to summit the highest and the second highest mountain in the fastest time in Suriname. There's been more people out into space than there have been on the peaks of these mountains. Then from there, we find the source. We sleep every night by hammock between the trees. Inflatable kayak, sort of paddle in one hand, machete in the other, hunting and gathering on a journey of source to sea of the Coppenham River in Suriname. So it is going to be, whilst this isn't a 352-day mission like the Yangtze, I feel with this, 40 to 50 days, but the intensity's just been ramped right up now.
Yeah.
No paths, nobody goes there. We will have to physically make our own tracks with a machete. You've got anacondas, you've got jaguars, you've got all of the snakes and spiders, you've got bulla ants, you've got hornets, you've got the kangaroo that swim at if you decide to take a piss in the river.
We've heard about those.
Right.
Yeah.
You've got everything. So each footing, you need 100% focus every time. Even if you sleep in the hammock and you're like, right, need to go for a wee, you've got to look at where you're standing.
Yeah.
And so that's what worries me most about this journey is
Each day is like a war against nature.
yeah, and like you can work with nature, because if you try to work against it, it will eat you. Everything surrounding it has got its own little defense mechanism. If you leave it alone, you're fine, but you need to know what to leave alone. Like even like a branch, you rub on one side of it and it's smooth. The other side, it's developed spikes and it can rip your skin off. And you just like, so because everything's out there, it's kind of like a living, breathing jungle of life and death, where there's more life within the Amazon than anywhere else in the world, not just now, but in all fossil records, in all history. So it's just this sort of recycle of life and death, which we will look to be a part of, not the death side, but we'll have to be fully in sync with the jungle, because I do think, any mistake, we're done.
I mean, I've heard so much stuff. I recently watched a podcast. I'd watched actually a couple with him, Paul Rosalie.
Legend.
Yeah. And a lot of his work is to do with the Amazon.
Yeah.
And it is fascinating.
His stories are mental as well.
Mate,
like,
really,
mental.
really intense.
Yeah.
And really opened my eyes up to like understanding that we just don't know jack shit. And I think that's probably something that you're obviously hyper aware of. But going into this, you can plan as much as you want, but you won't know jack shit until you're there, really, right?
100%. You're right.
Yeah, and I think one of the really fascinating parts that I'd heard him speak about, and I'd be really interested to know, and whether it's something that you've sort of anticipated, what your plan is bumping into uncontacted people. There are people that live in there.
Yeah.
And is it known that people are in there? Do you know much about this space? Because and it's one of the more popular things that are actually spoken about when it comes to the Amazon. It's these uncontacted tribes that live in the Amazon, and their hostility towards people. Is that something that you've thought about, or about in Suriname?
Yes, so far the lads out in Suriname, their answer is they don't know. They don't think so.
Okay.
So anytime I try to ask them anything about the source or the region that we're going, what's fascinating with the fact that they've led expeditions sort of in really sort of cool locations in Suriname, they've never gone this far west, even with film crews. So for them, they're also in training and in preparation, because they just don't know.
Right.
And that's what really excites me as well, because they don't have the answers, just like the whole landing the helicopter. I had assumed, because Guinness World Record are verifying 3 records if we achieve them, I had assumed that there's going to be a landing place for the helicopter, and Guinness World Records need to know what altitude that pad is at. Not pad, but like, cut down the forest, maybe a green patch, and they're just like, there is none. There is in some sections of the Amazon, but nowhere near where we're going. It's literally untouched, and a lot of it is uncharted. So the mapping has only ever since been done by satellite, and that's why the sources are off. So we might even come across stuff that not only maybe uncontacted tribes, but species that haven't been discovered. Sections that I know Steve Backshaw found a river in Suriname that he got to name, wasn't ever mapped.
Amazing.
Called it Ghost River, and they came across this rapid section, which again wasn't on the map, which they got to name.
Wow.
A local Surinamese guy got to, so it's just like, how are there still places like this? It's probably one of the last remaining genuine firsts left on Earth before maybe you have to do stuff deep in the waters or out in space.
Yeah. The Amazon has so much left to be discovered, and there are obviously attempts and stuff to do that, like yours and so many other people out there that are constantly exploring. But even then, it's a fraction of what's left to be discovered.
Yeah.
I mean, you hear about some of the stories about the wildlife in there, and I think one of the craziest things to me was just understanding about the canopy and how that there's actually almost more wildlife up than there is where you on the floor, and the amount of light that gets through, and all this sort of stuff is just fascinating. It leads to all this wildlife that we definitely won't see knocking around, or any holiday destinations that we ever go to. But also the sheer size of everything there is a giant version or the most toxic, the most poisonous version. When Paul was talking about, you know, the size of these anacondas and the snakes. Now I'm snakes are his
your thing.
spiders, I'm snakes.
Okay.
So-
this would be a bad place for you boys. then.
Yeah. So you know, hearing about, you know, 12, 13, 14, 15 foot
20 and the
20,
rest.
yeah, and that's what he was saying is like, you can go and capture, you know, you can go and see these things, but he had seen anacondas that he couldn't capture, but he's seen them
Yeah.
and how massive they are.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, that can't be put down as a record because it's not being captured and measured
Yeah.
tail or whatever, but you know they're out there.
Yeah.
And people had talked and spoken about how the size of these things,
Yeah.
but they're not on record. So
Exactly.
on record, the biggest will be like 17, 18 foot, but you know there's 22, 23, 24 out.
Yeah, exactly.